Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
You weren't built for comfort. You weren't trained to fit in. From the beginning, the world tried to housebreak you. Teach you the rules, lower your voice, mute your instinct. And for a while you obeyed. You wore the grin, you said the polite thing. You clipped your claws to keep the peace. But deep down, your instincts never forgot. They growled when you sat too long in rooms full of cowards. They roared when you watched weaker men celebrated because they were more palatable. That inner force, that pressure in your chest, that was the real you trying to break out of the disguise. And eventually you learned. Your intensity was never the problem. Their comfort with mediocrity was. A savage is not born in applause. He is born in isolation. He watches the world celebrate distraction while he sharpens his intent in silence. He studies when they sleep. He trains when they rest. He bleeds in places they've never even visited. While they build image, he builds edge. While they chase followers, he chases form. There's no spotlight in the savage's world. There's just obsession and quiet rage. The kind of rage that doesn't scream. It executes. The savage knows something most people refuse to learn, that becoming dangerous isn't about style. It's about repetition so brutal, so precise, that the mind bends before the body ever does. They preach balance as if you were made to sit evenly between comfort and chaos. But the savage doesn't balance, he devours. He doesn't need 10 tips. He needs one mission, one reason, one promise made in the dark that the world will one day witness in full light. He does not fear being misunderstood because he never built his path on explanation. His clarity isn't verbal, it's violent. It moves through presence. You know when he walks into a room. Not because he announces himself, but because the room adjusts its frequency to his. The savage doesn't wait to be seen. His life makes him visible. A savage removes safety nets not to impress you, but to leave no exit. He trains until fatigue becomes a friend. He works until pain becomes music. Every repetition is not just movement, it's proof. Proof that he is willing to become more than the body, more than the doubt, more than the opinions surrounding him like fog. He doesn't chase energy. He manufactures it. While most people live waiting for motivation, the savage moves like motivation owes him rent. There is no mood. There is only mission. There is a difference between action and embodiment. Most people act successful. A savage embodies it before results arrive. He walks with that look, that posture, that deliberate rhythm that says, I already bled for this. I already buried the excuses. I already outlived the version of me you remember. And that quiet confidence doesn't need to be validated. It terrifies. Because when people can't explain your transformation, they attack your intensity. They call you too much. They say you've changed. And that's the point. You had to change, because the man you used to be would have died under this level of pressure. To become a savage is not to discard empathy. It's to weaponize it, to understand pain so deeply that it no longer slows you down, it becomes fuel. Most people get hit and freeze. The savage gets hit and wakes up. He smiles through blood because he trained for the worst. He didn't read about adversity. He married it. He made a home inside discomfort. And while others ask when it will get easier, he mutters that sacred mantra under his breath, make me harder to kill. There is no destination for a savage, only thresholds. And each threshold demands the death of a former identity. The man who wants to remain comfortable cannot cross. He must stay behind, tweeting philosophies and liking videos of people who do. But the savage, he steps forward into the fire, not for glory, not for recognition, but because he knows that greatness is a blood ritual, one paid for in effort, sacrifice, and psychological brutality. You don't inherit the savage mindset. You earn it. Through days that break normal men, through nights that question your worth. And still, you persist. Savage does not fear failure. He fears stagnation, because failure is movement. It teaches, it sharpens, it humiliates and repositions. But stagnation, that's decay in disguise. That's rust on the mind. The savage keeps moving even if it looks chaotic, even if there's no visible progress, because motion itself is his fuel. He knows that what cannot be measured today will one day explode into results too loud to ignore. And when that day comes, it won't be a surprise. It'll be the final stage of a long war he already won internally. In tribal life, there were no participation trophies, no moral applause for showing up and being agreeable. Passivity was not a character trait, it was a liability. The man who didn't claim territory lost it. The man who didn't speak with clarity was ignored. And the man who avoided conflict didn't just get disrespected, he got eliminated. That was the law etched into the bones of survival. No emotion spared, no narrative softened. You either stood tall or you vanished. And though modern society has draped itself in silk and civility, that law never left. It just changed costume. Now they call it networking, they call it charisma, but the core remains: assertive people win territory. Passive ones read about it in books written by the winners. You've been taught to believe the lie of neutrality, that if you don't rock the boat, the storm will ignore you, that if you dim your presence, others will see you as humble, graceful, approachable. But biology has no room for that illusion. The man who doesn't claim his space has it taken from him. The moment you stop asserting your voice, your ideas, your value, the world fills that vacuum with louder men. And louder doesn't always mean smarter. It means more convicted, more willing to face rejection and still speak, more capable of being disliked in pursuit of impact. The passives stay liked. The assertives get remembered. Look around. Every empire you admire was carved by someone who refused to shrink, even when they were outnumbered, outclassed, outfinanced. They moved with authority. Because assertion is not about having power, it's about claiming it before the world offers permission. The man who waits to be handed a crown will die bareheaded. The man who studies diplomacy but never sharpens his instinct will get outmaneuvered by men who don't ask twice. The world doesn't respond to intentions, it responds to pressure. It bends for the one who speaks without seeking permission. And no, assertion doesn't require aggression. It requires ownership. The difference between the two is purpose. Aggression screams from insecurity. Assertion whispers from clarity. One tries to dominate. The other refuses to be dominated. And when a man moves with that level of grounded assertion, he triggers something ancient in the room. People lean back, not because he threatened them, but because his energy said, "I'm not here to ask. I'm here to declare." That's what the tribal world recognized, and that's what modern society still obeys, even when it pretends otherwise. You think job titles matter? They don't. People listen to hierarchy on paper, but they follow presence in the room. The most dangerous man is the one who doesn't need to flex rank, because his energy already told you where he stands. And that energy only comes from repetition, from a man who has failed publicly, bled privately, and yet shows up undiluted. A man who doesn't water himself down to make others feel taller. A man who asserts because he earned the right to stand in his full gravity. Passivity is rewarded with comfort, but never with control. You may keep your job. You may avoid confrontation. You may get liked, but you will not be remembered. You will not shape the room. You will not leave a legacy that echoes, because everything lasting, everything that matters, was built by people who risk discomfort to assert truth. History doesn't record the agreeable. It records the unshakable, the ones who weren't afraid to speak, even when silence would have been safer, the ones who stared back when others averted their gaze. Territory is not taken by the loudest, it is taken by the clearest. Even in relationships, passivity corrodes everything. The man who never sets standards will always attract chaos. The man who never says no becomes a vessel for resentment. The man who never asserts what he values loses himself in the names others assign him. Assertion is self-respect in motion. And when you don't assert who you are, you invite the world to assign you a role that suits them, not you. You go from being a force to being a filler, someone who exists only to accommodate the emotional architecture of others. You were not built to apologize for your fire. You were built to direct it. That's what the tribes understood. Every man had a role, yes, but that role was earned through demonstration, not declaration. You proved your worth through what you claimed, what you protected, what you endured. And that memory is still in your blood. You feel it every time you stay quiet when you should have spoken. You feel it every time you shrink in the presence of fake authority. You feel it every time you nod to avoid conflict, even when your soul screams rebellion. That pain, that's your biology remembering it was designed to stand. The world doesn't need more polite masks. It needs clarity. It needs people who will stop hiding behind trends, buzzwords, and diplomacy. It needs men who understand that peace without assertion is just silence under pressure. The tribe may be gone, but the game remains. Someone will always claim the territory. The only question is, will it be you? Will you shed the branding and embrace the truth? Will you stop asking how to be liked and start asking how to be real? Because in the end, it is not the passive who inherit the earth. It is the ones who assert, adapt, and own every inch they stand on. Motivation is a civilian luxury. It comes and goes like weather, too fickle to depend on, too fragile to build upon. A man who waits for motivation is already behind. Because the savage doesn't rise from mood. He rises from structure. Not a routine he follows, a system he built. One designed with zero margin for doubt. Precision so deliberate, so ingrained that the day unfolds like choreography. There's no debate, no delay. The world may be chaotic, but his protocol is bulletproof. He doesn't wonder if he'll work out today. He wrote it into the DNA of his morning. He doesn't ask if he'll execute. He designed his life so deeply that execution is the baseline. That's the difference. That's the weapon. Most people think discipline is a moral trait, that it's something you feel. They're wrong. Discipline is architectural. It's what happens when every hour has an intention and every action has a trigger. The man who builds that doesn't struggle to stay consistent. He struggles to be stopped. While the masses pray for productivity hacks, he's refining the war map. His workspace, cleared the night before. His phone, buried. His task list, not a wish list, a strike list. There's no room for negotiation because negotiation breeds delay, and delay invites entropy. He knows time won't bend to his emotions, so he bent his reality to his mission. That's not discipline. That's dominance through design. The savage treats his calendar like a soldier handles explosives, with care, with precision, with reverence. Every block of time is a blade sharpened to cut through noise. He doesn't squeeze deep work into the leftover slots. He protects it like territory. His calendar is not a place for hopeful effort. It's a fortress. One where every hour must justify its existence. One where meetings die unless they serve war. One where distraction enters only to be executed. He's not harsh because he's antisocial. He's harsh because his ambition doesn't leave room for dilution. That is not selfish. That is tactical. You don't get precision from feeling good. You get it by bleeding for clarity. Clarity on what you want. Clarity on what must die for that goal to live. Clarity on the hourly behavior that makes your results non-negotiable. Once that clarity is built, the system becomes sacred. It doesn't care about your fatigue. It doesn't accommodate laziness. It absorbs you. A savage doesn't feel disciplined. He feels possessed. There is no option to break the chain, because each link wasn't random. It was forged through pain, fire, and reflection. The routine is sacred because it was earned. Systems don't fail because the user is lazy. They fail because the user is unclear. They build routines to feel organized but never map the identity that sustains them. The savage does both. He doesn't just organize, he engineers. He reverse engineers his future self and then builds a daily battlefield that molds him into that figure. Each day becomes an algorithm of ascension. Wake, work, study, recover, reflect, repeat. It is not aesthetic, it is armor. And that armor is worn until the mind doesn't flinch, the body doesn't protest, and the mission doesn't pause. Most people chase habits. The savage builds protocols. Habits are reactions to goals. Protocols are blueprints for war. The man of protocol knows the exact trigger, timing, and context for every task. He doesn't hope to remember. He doesn't rely on reminders. He builds external constraints that trap him inside his best self. There is no escape hatch. That's the point. If the world ends tomorrow, his system would still be in motion, because it wasn't based on motivation. It was based on inevitability. A man like that doesn't run out of energy. He becomes energy. There's no glamour in this life. There's no crowd watching your early morning reps. No applause for skipping dopamine hits to stay aligned. No cheers when you say no to the event, the distraction, the drift. It's silent. It's brutal, but it's clean. Because once you taste the power of a self-designed day, one where every hour compounds and every action stacks, you never return to chaos. You become allergic to randomness, and that allergy saves your life. He doesn't feel productive. He is productive, because he removed the option to drift. The savage doesn't juggle priorities. He assassinates them, one by one, with mechanical detachment. Not because he lacks feeling, but because he trained his emotion to serve, not sabotage. That kind of order creates a new force of nature. A man whose very hour is dangerous. A man whose quiet day is more lethal than most people's loudest breakthroughs. That is what a weaponized schedule looks like. A day designed like a weapon doesn't tolerate indulgence. It audits you. It breaks you. And it builds you. Every minor deviation feels like a fracture in your code. And over time, that precision recalibrates your identity. You no longer wait for confidence. You embody it through structure. You no longer seek energy. You become a generator. And when others wonder how you're so disciplined, you don't explain. You know they wouldn't understand, because they think it's about grit. But you know it's about architecture. Energy is not infinite. That's a fairy tale told by those who never fought long enough to know what depletion really feels like. The savage knows better. He's felt the cost of unfiltered compassion. He's seen what happens when he bleeds for people who only bring buckets, never bricks. That's why he became selective. Not bitter, not cold, selective. Because anything that doesn't compound is extraction. If it doesn't sharpen the mind, deepen the purpose, or reinforce the mission, it's theft. The savage does not allow theft. Not of time, not of emotion, not of bandwidth. Energy is currency, and every withdrawal must justify itself in returns. Compassion without design is destruction disguised as virtue. You give and give and give, until your nervous system begins to erode, your focus splinters, and your goals feel distant and blurry. The savage doesn't operate on emotional instinct. He evaluates cost. Every interaction is filtered through a single metric. Does it reinforce the system or weaken it? If it builds, it stays. If it drains, it dies. Even kindness has structure. Even love has boundaries. Because without a container, emotion becomes chaos. And chaos, when left unchecked, topples empires faster than war ever could. The savage doesn't just say no. He trains his entire life to become a fortress of earned no. People don't ask him for nonsense, because his energy signals consequence. His presence isn't up for random access. He doesn't orbit drama. He doesn't fix people who won't lift a finger to repair themselves. He doesn't rescue the drowning who refuse to swim. He observes, detaches, and continues forward. Mercy without intelligence is martyrdom, and a dead man builds nothing. So he lives, not just long, but loud, intentional, and guarded. There's nothing admirable about being available to everyone. It is the path of the dilated, the unfocused, the undisciplined. The savage cuts that illusion at the throat. He doesn't ghost people. He becomes so energetically exact that only those on his frequency survive the signal. His silence isn't rejection, it's filtration. If you weren't building, he was never speaking. He's not rude, he's real. And in a world addicted to shallow reciprocity, that realness feels like violence. But it's not violence, it's precision. He doesn't seek validation for boundaries. He enforces them with posture. No raised voice, no explanation, just unshakable clarity. Because he's learned through scars that wasted energy doesn't just cost time, it derails identity. Every minute spent explaining the obvious is a minute stolen from mission. He doesn't speak in circles, he closes loops, fast. That doesn't make him a machine, it makes him aware. That awareness makes him rare, and that rarity becomes gravity. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you protect. Even in creation, he chooses compounding, the book that rewires thought, the workout that fortifies spirit, the conversation that elevates blueprint. Everything else, static. The savage sees content as calories. Consume too much of the empty and you lose form. So he fasts from distraction and feasts on depth. That's why his attention feels different. It has weight, it has grip, because it wasn't handed to you. It was earned through alignment. He doesn't give time to those who drain faster than they build. He doesn't enter rooms that dilute his presence. He doesn't share ideas with those who only want to borrow fire without learning how to create spark. Because he's no longer interested in applause. He's focused on effect. An effect requires intention. He doesn't swing wildly hoping something hits. He aims. He aims because his energy is the barrel and his schedule is the bullet. No misfire, no waste, just clean execution. When others say yes out of guilt, he says no out of principle, because he understands the lie behind being nice. Niceness without structure is self-erasure. The savage isn't here to be liked. He's here to be effective. If that makes him misunderstood, so be it. He knows what he's guarding. His attention is not a handshake, it's a contract, and contracts carry weight. Those who fail to match it are denied access, not because they're unworthy, but because they're unwilling. And the unwilling dilute the inevitable. When the savage gives energy, it's like launching capital. He expects return, not from entitlement, but from system. Because even his generosity is measured. He doesn't give to feel good, he gives to grow. And if it doesn't grow him or the mission, he lets it burn. That's the cost of precision. That's the cost of being real in a world obsessed with being liked. But those who misunderstand are irrelevant, because those who build will understand, and those who understand will multiply it. They stare and they yawn. They watch your routine, your deliberate posture, your silent rituals, and dismiss it all as monotony, because it lacks spectacle, because it lacks the jittery chaos they've mistaken for life. What they don't realize is that domination doesn't announce itself. It repeats itself. The man who wins long-term isn't sprinting. He's compounding. Day after day, quietly building velocity so ruthless it shatters timelines. He wakes without drama. He moves without hesitation. His days look the same because they're designed. And in that design is death, for the average, for the distracted, for the loud. He isn't trying to impress. He's trying to ascend. The addicted mind needs novelty, needs stimulation, needs something to chase just to feel alive. So they bounce, task to task, trend to trend, platform to platform, never planting roots deep enough to produce anything immortal. They confuse movement for momentum. But the mind built for domination doesn't chase, it builds. It returns to the same disciplines, the same pages, the same core lifts, the same code base. Not because he's stuck, but because he's not finished. He doesn't quit early just to feel something new. He keeps going until the repetition becomes reputation, until the habits become gravity, until the world bends to the system he never abandoned. Panic has a soundtrack, flashing screens, endless tabs, dopamine surges from meaningless updates. They live like they're in crisis because crisis gives them purpose. But crisis is not progress, it's noise. And the man engineered for conquest knows this. He's allergic to overstimulation. He doesn't need to feel overwhelmed to feel worthy. He prefers silence.